Hello, this is my presentation on the reflections of the movie Sign. So for the theme, we have that there is no coincidence in the events of life. And so some of the supporting locutions that we have is the flashback that occurred in the movie, where the protagonist is interacting with his wife right after an accident. As she was on the verge of death, the first things that she said is, "It was meant to be." Later, we find out that the interaction of the protagonist and his brother Meryl, that the final words that she said was, "Tell Meryl to swing away." And then we also have the interaction between the protagonist and his brother that shows the different types of beliefs in the world. That those who receive luck have either two explanations for this luck. That either there's a higher being watching out for that person, or that everything is a coincidence. And so the exact locution that is said in the movie is this. Sure, there are a lot of people watching this who think that this could be a bad thing. But there are a lot of people watching this who think it's a miracle, a sign of God's existence. It's all in how you look at things. And so, as the conversation continues on, we find out there's a clash between the different viewpoints, where the brother of the protagonist, Meryl, he has the miracle mindset, and then for the protagonist, he has the understanding that there is no coincidence. Sorry, that everything is a coincidence. The final locution that we have is the interaction with the protagonist with his son through the asthma attack. The locution says this: "The fear is feeding it. Don't be afraid of what's happening. Believe it's going to pass. Believe it. Just wait. Don't be afraid. The air is coming. Believe. We don't have to be afraid. It's about to pass. Here it comes. Don't be afraid. Here comes the air. There we go. We don't have to be scared at all. We know it'll pass. We believe it. Don't be afraid." And so with this, I think there's two reasons why this was put in the movie. That yes, it's meant for the son of the asthma attack, but I also believe that this is something that the protagonist needed to hear about his issues with the world, his issues with his wife dying. That he doesn't have to be afraid of what's happening, that it'll pass, that he will get through it, and that he will come out being okay with everything. And so we go into the plots and elements. And so one element that I saw throughout the movie was the usage of shadows. That brings out this mysterious feeling that makes this movie a thriller. But not only does it make the movie a thriller, I think it also plays a huge important role in this mysterious feeling where the protagonist is on this journey to discover the answers of life, or learning to be okay with the world. And so with the plot, we have the coming of aliens, which push the story, yes. But we had the worldview crisis way before the movie happened, where we have the death of the wife. And so throughout the movie, we see that the protagonist is battling between the aspect of signs and whether things are just a coincidence in the world. We also have the conversation between the beliefs throughout the entire story. And so again, we have the beliefs of the protagonist and his brother. But not only that, there's conversations throughout the whole entire movie with the family as well. And then it leads to the climax of the son's capture by the alien with the toxic gas, and then everyone hoping that the son will live. And then we have the last scene that shows not only the belief in faith again, but that he is now a believer and that there is no coincidence in the world. That he understands that there is a grand plan, and he's okay with everything that happened in the past. And so for my theological categories that I've chosen, the one that I've chosen is cosmology. The reason why I chose cosmology is because the protagonist struggles with the understanding that his wife's death was meant to be. And so he's battling, again, the aspect of there's a grand plan, that this universe and this world functions with a grand plan. And so we have our biblical and theological category thesis. The biggest example for God's sovereign over death is when David's baby was destined to die due to the sin of David. And although David fasted, begged, and prayed for the son's destined death to be gone, the death of the baby was in God's hand throughout the entire time. And so here's my survey of the biblical material. That the story of David's son's death shows God's sovereignty over death. And the passage where we find the death of David's son is in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 1 through 24. And so looking at some specific verses, we have God's statement of the death and his reasoning, which is found in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 14. And this is what it says. But because by doing this you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the son born to you will die. And then we have God's statement, the baby's official death, right, which is listed in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 19. And this is what it says. David noticed that his attendants were whispering among themselves. He realized the child was dead. Is the child dead? David asked. Yes, they replied, he is dead. Right? And so the story, to summarize the story, David saw a woman, Bathsheba, on his roof. And so he decided to take Bathsheba and send Uriah, her husband, on the front lines to die. And as he was sinning, the prophet Nathan came by and told him this parable, kind of the story, that riles up David for the struggles that the shepherd went through, only to realize that David was the one who was causing the issue in this story that Nathan prophesies to him. And with that, God tells David that he is not going to die, but that someone has to suffer with the sin. And so therefore, his son has to die. And so there's this understanding that God is in control of what is happening in the world, in the universe, and he has control over who is dying. And that there's a reason for why some people have to die. And so how exactly does this synergize with the film? The death of the wife and her thoughts show that there was a reason for her death. As she says, tell Meryl to swing away. To which is later said in the movie when they attack the alien to save the son. We also have the understanding that the son was saved because his lungs were closed due to the asthma that he had, which again shows that everything was pointing that he was destined to live. The wife's killer, as he was driving while drunk, he knew that everywhere that he was driving, that there was nothing, that he could have crashed anywhere. But that he crashed at the one spot that there was a person walking, the protagonist's wife. He himself knew that the accident was meant to be. But how exactly and the reasoning behind it, no one knew until the very end. Ultimately, there's a lot of examples throughout the movie that fall closely aligned to Christian beliefs that can point to God's sovereignty. there are some dissonance with the film. And so although the movie may show that there is no coincidence, it leaves a lot of room for interpretation and doesn't have to be exactly God, Yahweh. And so, for example, it can lead to the understanding that there is a grand plan, yes, but that there is no God, as if the universe had its own destiny. So for example, we have Stephen Hawking, who was the main push for this cosmological theory, that there is a grand plan in the universe, but that there is no God. It can also lead to different understandings of how the world works in a cosmological way. Another example is when we start to believe that the things of this world, although it's not a coincidence, it also does not have to be exactly God, Yahweh, but it can be a different God. And so if people have a different religious view, we see that it will differ from the Christian belief of the Christian understanding of God's sovereignty. And so that is my presentation on the movie Signs.